So today we're going to be talking about the sale of the Telegraph, what that means, and the question that never got asked. So let's start at the beginning and rewind to 2023. The Telegraph was in trouble. Barclay family owed 1.2 billion to Lloyds Bank, which had subsequently seized control of the paper. However, in comes our hero, RedBird International Media Investments. They stepped in with a deal. They provide the 1.2 billion to pay off Lloyds in exchange for ownership of the Telegraph. It was accepted, wheels started to turn. However, it turns out it wasn't that clear cut. When we take a look at RedBird IMI, we see that 75% of its funding actually came from IMI, which is owned by Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Yeah, okay, I can't do the pronunciation. But he's effectively the UAE vice president. He's Manchester City Football's owner, and he is a member of Abu Dhabi's ruling family. Now, alarm bells rang. Conservative MPs were furious. Labour actually agreed. Press freedom groups united. Foreign states cannot own British newspapers. So the government then announced legislation blocking foreign state ownership. Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser launched a probe, and facing regulatory impossibility, RedBird IMI withdrew in April 2024. Victory! The media covered it extensively, and rightly so. This was a genuine democratic moment. Press freedom protected. And then the news cycle moved on, and we all lived happily ever after. Not quite. May 2025, the deal actually closed. So the law the government passed allowed for a foreign country to have a minority stake of no more than 15% of a newspaper. So what did RedBird IMI do? Well, they simply restructured, and in May 2025, 15% was financed by IMI and 85% by RedBird. This was opposed to the previous 75% by IMI and 25% by RedBird. And this is where we need to look back now and start talking about Peter Oborne and the numbers that matter. So in 2015, Peter Oborne claimed that the Telegraph killed stories about HSBC Bank to protect 1.15 million in annual advertising revenue. Now, to be clear, HSBC had no ownership, they had no board seats, they had no shareholder votes. They just provided that 1.15 million in ads. Oborne wrote, "I was told that HSBC was the advertiser you literally cannot afford to offend." And according to Oborne, that was enough. The stories got spiked, investigations got dropped, editorial self-censorship. Now, he ended up resigning in protest. RedBird IMI paid 500 million for the Telegraph. So let's do some simple maths here. 15% of 500 million is 75 million. And let's do some more simple maths. 75 million is 65 times larger than HSBC's advertising budget. Think about that. If 1.15 million in advertising creates enough pressure to compromise editorial independence, what does 75 million in ownership do? Because this isn't just advertising revenue, this is shareholder voting rights, this is potential board representation, this is quarterly investor meetings, this is long-term financial partnership. Now I know what you're thinking, well, we passed a law to protect us, so there must be some safeguards in that, and there is. The law included a safeguard where the Secretary of State can intervene if 15% ownership creates influence. But here's the problem. Peter Oborne's own resignation letter shows how invisible that influence is. How do you prove stories that never get assigned? How do you prove investigations that quietly die? Editorial judgments that happen behind closed doors? If a senior journalist couldn't prove that 1.15 million in advertising compromised coverage from the inside, how is the government going to detect 75 million in ownership pressure from the outside? It's impossible. And indeed, this issue was actually called out by an MP, as shown in the House of Lords Library, but absolutely nothing was done about it. Now look, A fair and balanced media is a crucial part of a democracy. It literally cannot function without it. Democracy requires informed citizens, and it's the media's job to inform those citizens. How do we ensure that when power owns the journalists? Look, the UK is more divided than ever, and the tool that's being used to cause that division, it is the media. It is absolutely crucial that we come together and demand media reform before it rips apart our country. Thank you very much for listening.